get ready to be transported to London, and Chris will chaperone us through Brands and Culture.
Yes, I had the delight of being the MC on the Involved stage in London last week, and this is coming to you, I think, in 2 weeks. But we talked to you about, the episode is all about all the amazing things that I learned, and mainly like across category. Like we talk about sports, we talk about alcohol, we talk about luxury, we talk about beauty, we talk about sports. I mean, it's just all over the place. And
there's takeaways for everything.
Every
like there's
single
takeaways for all types of brands, regardless of what your category is. That's what I thought was really fascinating. Like kind of as you went through, there are really kind of great lessons and takeaways. And bonus for the workshop naming conference workshop that you're going to figure out.
Yes, and also maybe see you in Cannes for the Brands and Culture there. So let us know what you think in the comments.
Enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in GoodCo, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Welcome to Good Thinking, Brands and Culture.
Whoop, whoop. Brands and Culture was honestly, like, I have to say just off the bat, Charlotte and Joe and Michelle are killing it. Like, it was so much fun, and they're just such lovely people. And
Rad
if
humans.
you don't know what Brands and Culture is,
let's give some back.
Yeah, so we spoke at Brands and Culture New York last year, which was around this time, and they changed the scheduling. So the New York one will be coming in November. They always do something big, like a cabana, they call it a villa in Cannes, and then they do this London, which is like their signature event, and it's all things it was funny, like someone was like, why are you here hosting this? And I was like, because I write about brands and culture. It's literally like what it's called. Like the people that come and talk at this event like are writing about or talking about or leading in brands and culture. Like it speaks for itself. It's well named, true to the
they do a rad job of like all of the parts and pieces of supporting it, of getting the speakers, of getting the MCs. And they're just like, as you said to start with, they're just rad humans who we personally and professionally adore.
Yes. And continue to like more and more, honestly.
Yeah. Great.
So what I thought we would do on this call or on this pod is go through. So I was hosting the Involved stage, which was the second stage at Brands and Culture, where we had the opportunity to get like deeper and like more intimate and do workshops and things like that. And I thought we would tell you everything that I learned on my stage.
So here for this. All right. So it was the Brands and Culture in London. The New York one is coming up in
November.
Okay, perfect. So this was the Brands and Culture in London.
Cannes is the next one. So if you are in Cannes, come to the villa. I mean, we're not being paid to say any of this. Like, I'm like, come to the villa as if it's my villa. I bet
they'll be having a good happy hour.
We may have crashed a few happy hours last year, but they always
100%.
have a great happy hour. But they also just do like, they don't do the whole panel fest of Cannes.
Yeah.
Like they do intimate workshops. They do gatherings. Like it's a little bit more, I would say, meaningful of a place. Like you can actually connect with people, and it's a nice place to be.
Yeah. The vibe is great, and the programming is intentional. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right. Tell me.
I'm just going to we were there for 2 days, so we're going to go through fast. But I figured what I would do is kind of give you my high-level takeaways from all the people that I saw speak, which, it's very rare that I go to a conference and actually attend the conference for 2 whole days. Like, that's a really long time to attend every single talk. I know that everyone says that they're going to do that, but you ultimately have meetings or, go out for lunch or, like, whatever. I was there and I saw everything on my stage. So It was awesome, and I'm going to tell you all about it. So the first person that was on our stage was Ruth Hooper, who's from the Women's Super League. So if you don't know what the Women's Super League is, you're probably not a soccer fan. But the Women's Super League is like a fascinating challenger brand. Like if you're interested in challenger brands, like there is probably not one that you should be looking at more than this one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I presented her as saying, like, and I truly believe this, I think that women's sports, and obviously she's focused most on women's football or women's soccer, but like women's sports in my mind is the biggest area of growth that I've seen, or the biggest change of culture, like cultural shift that I've seen other than AI. Like we went from like women's sports was kind of like this nothing, like left in the kind of fields of marketing, like nobody was being paid, nobody was paying attention, everybody was like kind of feeling sorry for them, but it was like, oh, like, you know, like, oh, poor women's soccer, it should get more attention, to now like brands vying for attention, everybody like from Dior to Elf to Sephora to, I mean, literally like the list goes on of brands collaborating with women's sports, like in general, not just soccer. But women's Super League is essentially like the main league in the UK. So like when you think of like Premier League, which is men's, women's Super League is the new Premier League for women, right?
Okay. In the UK. Right. Okay. And just going back to women's sports, like, I think it hasn't even like reached, like, I think a lot of people are like, okay, well, it's more important now. It's reached the thing. Like, I think it has so much opportunity and so many brands, and people should just be looking at like this huge space.
Yeah. And she gave this really like interesting, so they have gone from inception to where they are now in 18 months. And they have had the biggest, like, they have tens of thousands of people, like 111,000 people showed up one weekend to women's soccer all in one weekend. That was 2 weekends ago.
Okay, so they started 10 months. They started 10 months ago.
18 months ago.
18 months ago. Okay. My math is
like
not great.
As a league, like as this big league, like there were all these teams. And what I learned, like, while researching this, because of course, like, I'm nerdy and I do this, but like I listened to this history of like women's football podcast. And did you know that women's football was actually illegal for a really long time? So of
course it was.
During World War II, like women's sports teams were kind of like came about as like a way to inspire people, because there were all the men on the front line, and then the soccer league came. These women were playing soccer after like working like on machinery and building planes and like ammunition, and then they would play soccer to entertain people, to like really like build up morale, right? Like,
and women are rad.
Not getting paid, like just playing. And then when all the men came back, then there was suddenly like this, and they literally made it illegal. And then they've been fighting back ever since. So I think it's just like, it's such a strong challenger, like, intensity,
that's a challenger
right?
story for sure.
But what I really enjoyed about her talk, to get back to like her and what she spoke about, was, you know, they're working with, so they have all of these teams that they kind of like sit under their league, right? So they're like, This is the big league, like the MLB, for example, like with baseball, and like all these teams like are in the league, right? So some of these teams are like Arsenal and Chelsea, and like big operations.
I know those,
and have budgets, even if like it's the women's side is much smaller budgets than the men, it's still big. But then there are like teams who are literally almost grassroots. And so sometimes they're supporting, like helping these teams grow. They're sometimes like, you know, supporting as a league. Like they're doing a lot. They're having to play a lot of different roles. And they're also kind of now the face of like this thing that was previously like really grassroots, you know, like, so it used to be like women's sports was kind of under the radar, but there was all these passionate fans and all this like, you know, there was still stuff happening, but like it wasn't getting the public attention. So she talked about a few campaigns, and they've done some great campaigns, but she also talked about some campaigns where they did things like on social, and the backlash was really bad.
Really?
Yeah, like where people
because
were
it was pushing it too much. It was pushing it a lot as a concept, or just the idea of it.
They hired like an influencer to like do the draw, and like they felt like she wasn't, or they weren't like kind of taking it seriously enough. And like to these fans, like this, like people who've come up with this, like this is really important to them, and they've held up a side of sport that like nobody cared about, and then like, you know, suddenly there's this, and like you bring in these influencers, and it felt like they were kind of cheapening it or mocking it. And that was not what they were doing, but it was, and she was like, oh, like we realized that the next day, like we'd made a mistake. But like what I really enjoyed what she said was like, if we're not if we're moving this fast, like we've been only around for 18 months, like if we're not making mistakes, like we are not like doing what we're supposed to be doing. So she basically said to her team, like, yep, that was a mistake. Okay, what do we do tomorrow? And that was it. Like, no, like, big, like, hum and ha over, like, how do we, like, you know, yeah, there's repairs to be made. There are mistakes were made. And she talked about a lot of other positive things that she did, but I really just enjoyed, like, her mentality around, like, you know, we will make mistakes and, like, we should be making mistakes. And it has to be messy. And I think so many people, like, I also brought up the fact that, like, now, with AI, we're moving faster than we've ever moved before. And everybody's going, speed, speed. Like every board member, every CEO is like, speed, speed, speed. But if you don't have a vision, like what I liked about Ruth was she was like, yeah, like we're going to make mistakes because we're moving fast, but we know where we want to be. Like we know that we are here for the women, like, you know, like why we're here. And like, we want to make this the biggest thing. Like we want to be bigger than men's sports. Like we've got the vision. And if we're not going, if we're going to move fast, then we have to make mistakes. Like there's just no way, like there's just literally no way.
I love that. I love that. And I think we should pause on that for a second because we've talked about like about like the next gen CMO. And I think it's and next gen, not meaning like, you know, next generation, but not meaning like Gen Zs, but really about like, what is it now? Because I think it's completely different or needs to be completely different. And I think that mentality is exactly it. Knowing that you're going to make mistakes, supporting your team, supporting both the innovation of it and then kind of the, you know, the backlash of what it could be, the kind of down part of it, but continue moving forward because there is that vision, because there is that longer term. Like to me, that's everything. That's everything. Okay, Ruth Hooper, I'm in.
Yeah, very, very inspiring.
Amazing.
Then it was interesting, like this was the next speaker that I saw on, so we're just going to go in chronological order because like, honestly, I can't, my brain can't. But like the next speaker was, so if you're from the UK, you know, Ladbrokes is like, I can't think of like there's probably
I know
American equivalent.
Isn't it like sports?
It's betting. It's betting? Like a betting shop. Yeah. Like it's where you go to like, you know, bet on sports, like bet on soccer, bet on horses, whatever. Like you go inside and you bet. And I had brought up that like I had felt like, you know, in a space, like betting is one of those taboos that for me, like I'm like, ooh, like is betting like smoking? Like is it a area that I don't want to touch, right? As a human being, like as just me. And I always really am attracted to when I feel that way because I'm always like, yeah, change my mind. Come and like show me how my mind should be changed. And I will say that Patrick Boise apps, like, which I was like, oh God, the double hyphenate names are really, really challenging. But he's lovely. And like, you know, he was talking about like how, so he kind of had the opposite like problem of Ruth, right? Like Ruth is on this kind of rocket ship and she's just like, hold on, like, and Patrick kind of inherited this brand that was kind of like generally ill-perceived by most people in the community and not really like super relevant. Like when you think of the Kalshis of the world and all of these other brands that are coming up in the sports betting or betting in general, and like a brand that was kind of sinking. And I really enjoyed, like, I will say, like, you know, say what you will about betting, but like what I enjoyed about his talk was that he was like, listen, like there's this guy who like he's like their main consumer is a guy who's like working like 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 or, you know, 10 p.m. to 9 a.m., like whatever. Like he's this person, it's generally a male, and he just kind of feels like he's like never doing enough and never doing it right. Like he goes to work, he kind of like, you know, it's all the stereotypes that you kind of expect of this consumer. And he's like, but the reality is that we're just kind of like shoving them ads in their face and just being like, you should bet. And like not really like showing them anything that they like about themselves, right? So he had this comment that is like culture, like if you're doing culture well, like culture is a mirror that you can give back to somebody and show them a side of themselves that they would be like, that they feel really good about. And they did a campaign around it, and I can't remember the tagline. It was like it was clever, but it wasn't the point of for me, the talk wasn't about that particular campaign. But it was just like, there are redeeming qualities to every consumer, in my opinion. Like, that's what the takeaway was. And like, you can be a brand that champions people who are ignored and who feel ignored and show them a side of themselves that they actually like. And that's like a worthwhile like place to play as a brand. Just that. Like
100%.
And you don't have to be like, you know, everybody doesn't have to agree with your consumer at the end of the day. Like, only you have to agree with them and see them.
Okay. I'm loving this because these are amazing lessons, I think, for every brand, every human to be able to take away. The idea of, because I know what Ladbrokes is. And I think the idea for any brand, especially a brand like this, I love, like, inherited a brand that had lost its place in culture, and especially being such a heritage brand and, you know, and the audience. But I think to be able to look at any brand and hold the mirror up and find something that they want to see and have them really feel seen, like, that's magic. Magic.
Right?
I love that.
And he like
Love
showed
that.
a lot of great numbers that was like, obviously made that sound like it's working. Like, I think I do think it sounds like it is working, and it's working because that audience like was basically like just completely unacknowledged, and like, that's so super powerful.
They weren't seen, and I think can work for any audience, but especially like, imagine, you know, as we talk about taboos and shame and, you know, shadow and whisper conversations, like bringing that out. This certainly is one of those.
Yeah.
Certainly. Okay. I love this. Well done,
right.
Patrick.
The next talk actually was like a sleeper hit, in my opinion. Yeah. Like, I think this woman was fascinating. I would say that one like side note to this whole learning experience of doing this talk is that I would like to run a workshop on how to title your talks for people to show up for the talks that they want. Because I think that the talk that this woman gave was so inspiring, and yet like the title she gave it wasn't right for the place that she was in.
Yep. That tracks.
So her name is Zoe Phoenix McCandless. She's like head of partner impact at United Repair Center. And if you don't know what United Repair Center is, it's essentially like a business that has scaled brand repairs. So think like Patagonia or Levi's, most like a lot of like, I think Arc'teryx, like, you know, a lot of mainly I would say like performance sports brands. So, you know, like, you know, like the Patagonias of the world, but not just because they're good, like Rafa, that type of like brand where it's like performance gear. And they essentially are like a B2B offering, so they don't try to do B2C, but like they have figured out a way that it's like, okay, like my jacket that costs, you know, like probably $2,000 because it's a performance piece has a hole in the side, but like I can't just take it to some rando like person in my store, or like I could just buy another one, but wow. And they're scaling that for businesses, so like you can bring it in, and they do like this system through supply chain where like they can have all the backstock fabrics of like all the jackets, and like they're regularly sent fabrics so that they can like repair things properly. It's very interesting, like as a business. But her title was called like flipping the buy script. And I think that what it should have been titled was like services is a loyalty lever or something like that. Because, or like how to build brand loyalty. Because what she talked about was that one of the things that they've done as a business is like, when you send that jacket in, it is like you get an email that says like your jacket is being repaired by this person. Half of the people that they employ are refugees that have come like and who have like traditional like sewing backgrounds, and they hire them, and like they've given them careers and like these all over Europe. And then it's like, this is what's happening to your jacket. This is the repair that we're making. This is why we're making it. This is how we're making it. You then get like and by the time you get this repair back, you care more about that garment than when you sent it.
It's a journey.
It's a journey. They take you on a journey where you become more invested in the piece that you owned than the piece that you had, right?
That's interesting. That's interesting. All right. You become more invested because they're getting specific and sharing the name of the person who's repairing
and
it.
There's care being put into it. And like, ultimately you like then know like, one, this brand cares about my piece, my garment, me. Like I took the time to do this. They care about it. And like what they found is that like the loyalty to this brand, like that is like, okay, like, so now when you send it to Levi's, like they'll like repair it with the right stitching. Like they do the proper hemming. Like it's not a fake hem put on the bottom. Like, you know, like they're doing it right.
Yeah, that matters.
And ultimately, like you were like, oh, okay, like I'm going to pick Levi's because like ultimately, like I know that they really have the same values that I have.
I mean, that's fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. How many brands, how many experiences can you say that it's literally upping the brand love, the brand loyalty, you know, of any brand to be able to like have a service that not only does that, but they're actually repairing clothes as well. Like that's fascinating.
Yeah. And so, of course, they're like expanding. Like now it's becoming, like she was saying, it's growing so quickly as a business that like it's becoming kind of a must have. So they're expanding into luxury and like but like they're training all of their teams on like the way that these garments are made, like in a traditional way. And so like when you're sending it in, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to like slap a stitch on there and like call it a day. Like it's being remade in the way that it was made. I think it's fascinating, but
it is fascinating. I'm going through and like thinking about all of the repairs and things that I've made, and like, was it a journey or was it just a repair? I mean, even Ramoa, when we take our bags in, like, you know, to be able to create that, like, again, you're doing a service, but it sounds like what they're doing on top of that is actually doing even more than the value of the service. Like it's literally.
Yeah. I mean, I think
brand
Ramoa
loyalty.
is particularly good at this. Like, you know, it's just like, wow, like that you can get that done. But yeah, I think that and the fact that they can do it at scale. So like you can have stores all over the world and they'll repair everything for you. And they know how to repair it in the way that you wanted them to. And that's really interesting, right? Like, so, okay.
Love it. Great.
What else did we talk about? So the next talk was about retail, like also about retail. And the topic of conversation here was like, so Nuevo they're essentially like kind of like us, but like more retail. Like they do like a lot of like strategy and trends research for particularly retail brands. And my biggest takeaway, like he gave a pretty in-depth talk, so it would be hard to kind of like do it justice here.
Yep.
But and I think it ties into the conversation that we just were having, which was like the quality of the experience is the currency, like not attention, like the attention economy is gone. And like sort of the quality of experience that you're having at retail is really the currency that brands have to pull. And I had brought up that like, you know, my trends forecast, like the beginning of the year, like in the 2026 predictions, I said like, you know, there's going to be AI automation and it's going to be like, you know, all of like this instant like gratification and like finding things instantly and recommended culture. And like, that's going to change how we view websites and it's going to change everything.
Yep.
And then we're going to switch into kind of this big like physical retail swing into experience. But what they were talking about is like, it's the quality of that experience that matters. It's not just that you're having an experience, which obviously we agree with.
Yes. Truth.
And Phil Garnham is the ECD at Monotypes. Monotype is like one of those like companies that's like everywhere and then you don't think about them type of
I feel like
brands.
they're everywhere. Yeah, I feel like they're everywhere.
Well, they're often the co-sponsor to the Collins House, which is maybe why people know their names. But like essentially like they create type like fonts for brands, but they also like help brands like manage their like, you know, type libraries and, you know, governance of typography, which I know if you're a small brand sounds crazy, but if you're a big brand, it's actually like quite an undertaking.
It's needed. Yeah.
Yeah. And he gave a really interesting talk about kind of the thing that I thought was most interesting about his talk was like that, well, he started talking about like how like he likes to look at type in the world, and he was like looking at typography in Ukraine on the side of helicopters and like all this you would love these inspirational, like people write like inspirational quotes on the sides of these helicopters because like, you know, like all their friends and family are going off and like being in these helicopters. Wow. And they like write these positive affirmations kind of on the side of the helicopter, and it's like scrawled all over these helicopters.
Really? That's cool.
Like pretty interesting. And he was talking about how like, you know, it's over like, so there was that like type and culture, and it's really and he actually asked me to write an article or a section of his book, so I'm gonna
I love this
going to be contributing to that in a few weeks. But he was also talking about the future of type and how the interesting thing that he was saying, and this is something that I completely agree with, and I think it relates to kind of like how I was saying, like, I'm not sure about websites and like existing anymore, is that he was like, the truth is that like typography like makes you feel something, right? Like he was showing like the scale, and he was like doing these fun scales where he was like, this is a serious brand and this is a fun brand, you know, and like showing you different scales. But the reality is that like brands will adapt to individuals in the future. So his like kind of proposition was that he thinks that you will have like, there will be like a brand typography for you, and there will be a brand typography for me, and they might not look the same. And that like, how do you deal with brand and brand, like the perception of brand that we so have, and like, will that work or will it not work? Who knows? Like, you know, I actually think that, you know, from a personal level, like I think like we might go through a phase where we kind of do all this like personalization stuff, and then I think we might kind of like go back to where we were, where we want a perspective. But it was more that brands can and will do that. Like there will be brands that do that for you.
Right.
Much the way that you will build the website that you want if you want.
Right.
It, you know?
Right. I mean, it feels like in the world of like the less precious, like the moving away from the preciousness of a brand, and it's got to be exactly this and it's got to be perfectly that. If you have a real vision for it and what your brand actually does, then you have more room to kind of allow play.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not sure that people will really care about typography that much in that respect, but like maybe, and like, why not? I do think that people will want to build, like view the brand the way that they want to interact with it, right? Like it's like, okay, maybe, and that might be that it's like a small, like efficient font, and for you it would be graphic, and like maybe that is true. Like maybe that is how.
Interesting.
But the capabilities will be there.
Okay, that's cool, because it's interesting how much typography informs a brand. Like I'm just thinking back to like when, you know, the whole tech thing and blanding and like it was all so type driven.
Well,
like,
and he showed like these like examples, and he was like, it's so funny. Everybody focuses on messaging, but at the end of the day, like when you close your eyes, you almost never remember the message, and you just remember what the brand looks like, right? And much of that is typography, and the typography impacts the words, right? Like what you're saying is impacted by the style of the typography.
100%.
And so, yeah, he just gave a really like thought. It was a little bit more like kind of like esoteric, like interesting type talk.
Cool.
Really interesting. And then the last talk, which Charlotte moderated, that I thought was interesting because I think it brings up like, you know, like a hard truth for a lot of brands, was by the executive director of Clean Creatives. Do you know what Clean Creatives is?
No.
So Clean Creatives is like a website, or so maybe like a, I don't know, auditing body. Like I might not be using the right words here. But essentially, like, they go through and they look at, like, you know, like WPP and, like, agencies and say, like, okay, they're very focused on, like, climate change and mostly fossil fuel use, like, fossil fuel. So it would be like, oh, this, you know, agency, they named an agency. I don't think we need to name call the agency right here, but it's a big one that you've heard of. And it's like, oh, they took this big, like, project with Shell, for example. And they lost a ton of clients from it, like when they did it. Huge amount of clients. Yep. They lost a ton of employees. But they're like kind of the poster child for this, like as a most recent thing. But she's like, yeah, like, you know, like so many of these brands, like agencies are working with these companies. And like, and then meanwhile, you're a brand that like might be like, you know, well, she's like in general, like if you're kind of like, if you're the Bobbies of the world or anything, like, and you stand for something, like, do you want that agency to be standing up for those brands as well?
Right.
Like, do you think that that's a conflict of interest to your actual business? Not just to you as a, like a person and your values, but like, is this actively working against your business? Like, she was bringing up like coffee, right? Starbucks, or chocolate brand like Lindt. Like coffee right now, and chocolate too, is much more expensive because of all of the like fossil fuel deforestation and like having like all of these issues. And she's like, if you're this giant chocolate brand and you're Nestle, why are you working with an agency that is also kind of actively undermining your business, like your bottom line?
Right.
So, it's very activist-y. I think there's arguments on lots and lots of sides, but I think it was really, and to me, she was very focused on fossil fuels, but I think similarly, I think there's lots and lots of arguments for who are your agencies working for and what do they stand for and what are the values?
For sure. I mean, I am so here for that conversation. And I think I think the question isn't is it work? Can they work both sides of it? I think is it really true to both sides? If you're working for this, fossil fuel, and if you're working for this, totally. It's who do you want to be? What do you want to be? And it's almost like the values of customers. Now, this is just another layer of how it's really showing through from a brand standpoint, from an agency standpoint. And I think it's important. I think all of these things are important to ask and figure out, what you want, who you want to be working with.
And she was kind of just do your due diligence before you do an RFP. And so there's all these agencies, and probably we should be signed on to this, of committing to saying hey, these are the brands that we would industries that we probably wouldn't work on. And maybe you should go look there. So.
Yeah, no, that. I love that. I mean, that's why we're a B Corp. So yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Nice diversity of all of the conversations really and the very
And she brought up B Corp because
range.
B Corp has had some issues similarly, and she was saying that this agency was a B Corp and then they did this, and it's how does that work for you? Yeah. And and then B Corp was oh yeah, I need to do something. And so it's just a little bit it brings up another topic of conversation that we'll probably have on another day, which is it's just well, we're actually going to have it on the Signs call. So we'll do that on another podcast. All right. I know that I talked for a long time, so I'll try to get through these. But yeah, so the second day we had Andre Bogues, who it's funny because his title is acting global head, but he's been there for 2 years and he's lovely and incredible. And he works at Diageo Luxury Group, and he works on kind of the whiskey and the the very, very high end, if there's going to be a barrel of this very particular thing, he works in kind of the in that space. And I would say the theme, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, clearly the guy you want to know.
I mean, yeah, and he's also just lovely. But if I would say the theme that somebody very thoughtfully was what did I think was the theme of the first day, and my analysis of it on the spot was everything that we talked about was about trust. It was about trust in your team, trust with your consumer, trust with your agency. Everything was around trust, building trust, everything centered around trust. And I think the second day very much centered around storytelling, which I know is a little bit of a oversaid word, but I think that people did a really good job of kind of, and I don't know if this was on purpose, but it was just that's how I thought of it. But Andre did this really great kind of analysis of kind of all the luxury brands that everybody knows and admires, Loewe and all of these kind of luxury brands that are doing things differently to the traditional luxury brands. And he kind of pointed to this thread that these luxury brands aren't kind of talking about the product, or they're not just kind of pushing that they're a luxury brand. Ultimately they've been taking people on this quite emotional storytelling journey. And he kind of, again, I can't really do justice to his talk because it was a lot of examples, but I think it's interesting that ultimately so many people are alcohol's dead, and champagne as a category is over. And I think that as an industry, I think has just not led with much emotional human-centered storytelling for a really long time. And I would say that the Veuve example that we had with the Inca Ilori was a different example of that, but hasn't really in my opinion kind of gone out into the world. It was just isolated in that particular event. But I agree, when you look at Loewe, it's Jonathan Anderson is taking you through this kind of he's just experimenting and taking you on a journey. And again, again, like we talked about contracts the other day, but it's like he's like, he makes a contract with you and he delivers on that, and that's emotional.
Yes. Yeah, my mind immediately went to everything that we saw, because we saw a lot of luxury in Milan, and I think that's really true, that the ones that really hit were moving away from here's our product, this is why it's good, whatever that is, and kind of created this dream world to make you feel something. And I think all, like literally every single one did that in a way to make you feel something that was of the brand. And it pushed in a way. And I do think, and maybe it's for legal reasons, maybe it's other things, that booze has not been in that space as much. But I think the Vouv example, like, is the top of my list for sure.
Yeah. And I think that, it's easy to, I think, kind of like poo-poo it, but like, you know, like in Instagram, like we talked about Instagram Premium and all of these things. And like, that is like, it's taking the cultural mirror, shining it back on people, and then taking them on that journey. And luxury is particularly bad, I think, in my opinion, about shining that mirror. They're really afraid of shining the mirror on like real people. Like, very afraid. And I think actually like they should be less afraid of shining it on the people that are their actual customers, because I think they think that customer like doesn't really exist anymore. And like, I just don't believe that. Like, I spent a lot of time hanging out with some very cool but very wealthy people in London, and like, these were very great people, but like are also not seeing themselves in any marketing, I would say, because people are afraid of telling that story too and coming across as too like kind of highbrow. And everybody's afraid of like telling these stories, but the ones that are actually doing it are doing it well.
Right. No, I think that's well said. And it's this fear of, I think with luxury, like, is it aspirational enough if we show the mirror back on our audience? And then I think there's obviously this other mirror of like, is it too aspirational that you're going to cut out these people? But I think anytime you're showcasing, which again, this moves to the brand book conversation, you're moving away from like the lifestyle of it and showing like actually like somebody being seen, like that's a very, very different thing.
And I think you can do that really aspirationally. And there are brands who are, you know, I think Tiffany has started to do an interesting job of that. And we talked about it. Like, I think you could push further and be more of that. But like, brands are trying it, but it's been like a slow roll, you know, like, and I think it's getting there.
Tiffany's is a good example. I think Mercedes, remember that ad a while ago? Like, I think there are moments when it's actually, they're really doing it. And I think those brands, when they do it right, they really hit on that, exactly what we're saying.
Yeah, and in some ways, like the Gucci example of when they were like kind of mocking themselves, it was working. And then when we went to Salone, it felt like it went off the cliff. So like, you know, like there is a middle ground.
Yep. All right.
Then I saw Cheryl Miller Houser talk. And like, I will say,
tell me everything.
I had been really waiting for this one because so many people had told me about her. I mean, I know her. She's a reader.
Yeah, she's a buddy. Yeah,
she's a buddy, but I'd never seen her speak. She is a 5-time main stage speaker at South by, which is basically like a record holding spot. Like, she has the main stage every year, and like somewhere between like 1,300 and 1,500 people come and see her every time. Like, it doesn't matter what slot she has. Just like, she's a legend.
Amazing. Yeah. And she's a documentary filmmaker when she's not
a documentary filmmaker,
on stage.
And she particularly talks about human-centered storytelling. So it was like very like much like of the kind of, and she did kind of it did a workshop, but she also did kind of an abbreviated version of her talk. And she just like, so she had a few lines, and I think that this is probably the best way to do justice to her, because like she just came out with some bangers. But she said like, belonging isn't about fitting in, it's about accepting and seeing ourselves. And that like brands that create belonging like do that by showing, again, a little bit like Ladbrokesy, like showing them and saying like, you're like, we accept you for who you are, like, and when you do that really well, like, it's really amazing. And she gave the example of Yeti, like, and they had that what could be deemed a negative commercial, right, which I know you don't like. But like, it was like, don't buy me a Yeti, right? Like, if you don't want to. And then it was like all of these things about like, you know, like you want to like go and like sleep with your face like somewhere near a muddy puddle. And like, if you don't like hanging, like, because it was like a gift for somebody else, right? It was like, and you were going to give it to somebody you cared about. And it's ultimately this person was going to drag you on some camping trip or some like outdoor journey that you didn't fucking want to do. But it was showing both sides of feeling seen. It was showing the consumer saying like, hey, recipient, like we see you and we love you. But it was also saying like, hey, gift giver, we see that like the sacrifice of giving somebody these gifts, like even if you don't fully fucking believe in this, is also kind of magical and a true act of love, right? She had an enormous amount of examples. She gave this brilliant example of this brand out of Brazil that like every Mother's Day like shows these like very, very raw, like heartfelt, like kind of like the Christmas campaigns that everybody like always references out of the UK like every year, where
Marks
it's
and
just like they
Spencer.
really not Marks and Spencer's. It's going to be name recognition 101. It'll come back to me. It's they're like known for Christmas. But it was more that like they have become super known for being basically like the gift that you give a mom. Like if you really, really want to give a gift to somebody who's a mom, like by giving this gift, like you are saying like I'm attaching myself to like the most seen version of motherhood. And they've talked about like they've done campaigns over the years about infertility, about like child loss, but like doing it in a really aspirational, like, wow, like that was really powerful. And like every year, like people wait for these campaigns.
That's beautiful.
And she gave the example that it's like, these are the brands that people like tell their friends about and rally around, and that we ultimately make buying decisions because of emotions. And like if you become like, this is centered around human stories, like you become an emotional brand, and then we buy you because we're emotionally attached to you.
Amen.
Period.
Amen. Yes.
It was a cool talk.
Yeah. I love the belonging isn't about fitting in, but it's about accepting ourselves and seeing ourselves. Like,
right.
Yes.
I mean, like when she said that line, I was like,
yeah, that's really beautiful. But it's so, I mean, that's great. Great. Love her. Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Well
then
done, Cheryl.
I had like what I nicknamed him like kind of the father of LinkedIn, Will Poskett, who's like, he's been all over. If you spend any amount of time on LinkedIn, you've seen his name, but he does something very similar to us where he talks about challenger brands. And so he went through kind of a workshop with people. So again, it's a little bit hard to do it justice here, but he talked about kind of like, he gave examples of like, he did a lot around kind of like mission statements and like how, and purpose statements, but he also, as we believe, right, like is like, it's not, purpose is not like rah like do good necessarily, but it's about like having like a reason to be. And I think this is exactly like what we were saying in the Age of Authorship. Like it's like you need to have meaning to exist today. Like anybody can come and create your business overnight, and essentially that was the entire genesis of the workshop. But he gave some really good examples of like Lego originally was like a furniture company, and then but they had this big lofty mission statement around imagination, and then that led them to become, you know, this global toy brand. But that's not where they began. And ultimately in this day and age, like you're going to pivot like more times than you can imagine. And like when you have this clarity of vision of like what you stand for in culture and like what you want to be known for, like you'll be able to create products and worlds and kind of ladder up to that in various different ways.
Love that. Yes.
That was my takeaway.
Truth. Agreed. Then
there were two people. So Looktastic was next, and like Looktastic is kind of like an Ulta of the UK.
All right, is it Look Fantastic or Looktastic?
Look Fantastic, I think. Okay. It looked fantastic. And they had like two, like, so it was interesting. Like one of the people, Georgie, was head of brand, is like, she's kind of been with the brand for a really long time. And then there was Keely Goff, who's new. And they just talked about building brands. And like, again, they talked a lot about kind of like their internal culture of like how like she came in, like Keely came in like kind of new a year ago, and like just kept kind of pushing different ideas, and like, and then ultimately like Georgie was saying that they had to as a company kind of begin to say yes. And so like applause to Keely for getting them to say yes, but then once they started doing it, like she sort of took a legacy company that was kind of used to operating in kind of this performance marketing space, and then like started showing how like these campaigns, like you need, like she added humor to some of them. She incorporated employees into one of the campaigns. Like they just did a variety of different things, and they were quite playful over the last year. And then like the brand has gone from like strength to strength because of it. But
that's cool. I love that.
Yeah, they were, very cool. And then the very last talk was actually my most inspired workshop. Like I thought this was the best workshop.
Wait, just going back one thing to the Look Fantastic, because I think it hits something that we haven't talked about yet, which is the internal culture. And you know, you can't have a change in brand without the internal culture, and starting first on the internal culture, and then obviously seeing that it leads to the external culture, which is, what we all refer to as brand, like is an amazing way to do it. And it sounds like that's really what they figured out.
And I think by like, we've talked about employer brands in past like podcasts and things, and like go back and look at the Paradigm recap from last year with Eugene. He talked about like the power of like having employees like be part of your brand, and like like unleashing them in that way. And like they were talking a lot about how like when they finally, so they did this other campaign that had humor in it, but then like that kind of allowed them to open up, and then they incorporated the employees, and then the employees were like really part of the marketing, right? Like they were really like on board with the marketing team and excited because like they'd had this big success, and then they try other experiments, but now everybody's on board because everybody's been part of it. And I think it's an interesting kind of like cultural space. Like that wasn't I think that was the title, but they had these 5 pillars of how to do this, and they had like the structured takeaway. But to me, it was just like, like change your culture, and like it like can do great things.
I mean, that's powerful as fuck. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Take us home. Take us to your favorite.
All right. And then like it's so interesting because like on paper, I was not convinced about this workshop, right? Like I'll be totally honest. Like it was like co-creating campaigns through moments of sports. And I was like, oh God, like this won't be for me. It was the best time. Like it was the best workshop, I would say. And like one of the things, and I told them like what they did was these guys like make ad tech, right? So like ad tech can be like, if you've been to like an ad tech conference, you just like glaze over.
No.
Well, there are a lot of them. There was a big one recently. It can be really boring, right? And because it's like, oh, it's like this company is kind of just like selling me on their technology. But what they did was like they presented what their technology could do in like literally like 3 minutes. Like it was very short and sweet. Like this is what we do. And then they gave everybody like a challenge, and they were like, okay, so what we're going to do on a worksheet. And they were like, we've given you a client. So you had to team up in teams. Everybody had a different client. And then you were allowed to like choose like, so you had like a matrix of like digital out of home or social ads, or like you had like these kind of like the platforms that you're allowed to use. And then you had to come up with kind of what Sportradar is like particularly good at is that they get like real-time data from sports, so you can like tap into something like if somebody scores a goal like live, like they have that data, so you could like actually use that in your ad. So they're like, what kind of like moment in sports or moment in a game or whatever, like big moment in time would you tap into? And so to like give you an example, we had Spotify and my team, and we won, just so you know. But like we talked about how like we could take over, like we could have digital out of home ads where it was during the tunnel walks. And because it's Spotify, we would have like the lyrics of each player. Like, so as they're coming out on these digital out of homes, the lyrics are playing, and you could like QR code to listen to the lyrics. But then if you like had it, we could retarget you with a premium like feature, which is if you signed up for premium, you could actually get a private podcast to like these like particular players talking about things that you wouldn't get a chance to listen to somewhere else. But there were lots of other ideas. But I thought it was interesting how they got you to think about their technology, got you to think about what they offered, and then like actually let you kind of like play around with it. And like it was a well-designed workshop, and like I thought it was, if you're in the ad tech space, like I thought it was a very good way of kind of making it feel fun.
That's brilliant.
And it was
to take
very
something
short. Like the whole workshop took 15 minutes. Like
amazing.
Done it.
Amazing. I know you had a lot of fun. I think it wasn't just because you won.
I
But
know,
yeah,
I
that's
always
really
have fun
smart.
coming
That's
up
really
with
smart
ideas.
that they took something that is kind of what they do and then made it fun. Well done.
Yeah, and people had ideas around. You could pick the sport. So like we picked soccer because someone on our team was like more into soccer. I was like, I had suggested fencing, but no one was into it. But like,
Wonder why.
but like people were into like did squash and some like people did tennis and like it was just a fun way to engage in a product demo, like not a demo, but like an experience. And I think that was really well done. Yeah, it was a super interesting, like, again, there was some really big speakers on the other stage that had some very, very big, like, kind of more, not more inspiring, but, like, you know, definitely more keynote-y kind of, like, topics. But I loved our stage because it was, like, really, like, quite, like, hands-on. Practical.
Yep. I love it. That sounds super fun. I'm excited for New York.
Yes.
And I feel like there were some really good lessons.
We got huge reception from our talk on trends last year. Many people are here because of that.
We did. Yes. Yeah, that was a really fun talk. Yeah, excited to do that again.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Anyway,
well,
see you at
this was helpful.
Culture
This is informative. Yes. That's the next stop. Happy hour, brands and culture. I'm sure there'll be one. Not just that I fictitiously show up to. All right. Well, thanks for the overview. Definitely a super fun one, and a shout out to all the peeps at Brands and Culture. Let us know what you thought. Let us know anything else you saw at Brands and Culture that we didn't.
Ciao, ciao. That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.